I'll play the song in the background in honor of Tim Lim and Mike Miller. You ever look at these paper, and like tap the screen to make sure that the screen won't go off of a paper item? Yeah, all right. Anyway, the nicer side of COMICSGATE, the big group is EVS, and then there's this smaller, odd assortment independents who are sort of on their own, who, in my opinion, should start cross-pollinating. And yes, I realize how fruity that sounds as I say it aloud. You've got JDA, Tim Lim, Mark Pellegrini, Mike Edwin, Robert Willing, and a bunch of other folks. They should start smoozing with each other. I'm sure the audiences overlap, but there's also potential for growth. Then I see Angle Team kind of off in his own little corner. Everyone is trying to do their own thing and build their own channels, but it's slow going. So why not team up and cycle through the channels? Mix and match and look for chemistry that works. Get on that that girl who does the Orgasm Girl comic, Dan Fiend or something? Nerd Wonder, Nurkish. Why is everyone so shy in COMICSGATE? Hey, maybe I'm putting my nose where it doesn't belong, but I see a bunch of small channels all on their own. I assume the ultimate goal is to sell products. To do that, you need to entertain, and in my humble opinion, not to say that the small streams aren't entertaining, but they'd be better with more people. Okay, I guess I am saying that they aren't entertaining. If I had to guess, I would assume people really want to build their own channels and get those sweet super chats. But you gotta know your limitations. Some of you are comedians, some are straight men, and some are edgy. And then there's some who are just kind of more the informative type of YouTuber. Now, usually less is more, but not in this case. You want more than 6 people on a stream, and you want diversity of personality types and delivery. I heard Mecha Random 42 and Zach, and it was an awesome mix. So, is a mix like Zach and Anna from that Star Wars girl? Because he interrupts and she hates that, so that little bit of friction is really funny. Love Fest streams are not as good. That's why Nurkish is a welcome addition, because he seems to be able to poop on everything and everyone. Why do you think drama streams do so well? You don't have to go overboard, but sitting around and blowing smoke up each other's pee holes ain't helping anybody. I heard someone say that, unmentioned, when he heard me mention the split between those who hope the big two will return to normalcy versus those who are ready to see COMICSGATE comics become its own thing, he said that if the big two tank, it will hurt the independent COMICSGATE comics. I don't know the industry like Mike, Zach, or Tug, and the others, but I do know a lot about SJWs. DC and Marvel will continue down the path of wokeness because they really believe it, and they don't care about money as much as you think. And yes, moranical is a great word. It's as legitimate as slobber knocker. It's also an extremely difficult job to escape the extreme left cult. The social pressure by their peers to conform is intense. Social media allows the political officers to closely watch the peasants, and if they get out of line, to whip them back into shape via public threats. So I don't see how mainstream comics would ever stop being misandrist or racist. The more woke they got, the more woke they're expected to get. It's this weird funneling effect for SJWs. Maybe the COMICSGATE guys have a hope of putting comics in physical locations. I don't know if that's the issue it used to be. I think putting comics in Amazon is more important, and probably look at lowering the prices if the comics are short in terms of page count. If I remember right, Cyberpunk was a bit over 2 comics in the floppy format for $35. That seems a bit excessive. But obviously, and I'm not throwing shade here, the model worked because it grossed $1 million. I mean, if it works, keep doing it. But for example, I have these 2 books here, 1 and 2. They're $60 each, and they are... Oh god, these things are seriously heavy. Okay, they're not in color, but they are huge, huge books. And you know, the weird thing is, I never noticed this before. They don't have page numbers. Isn't that frickin' bizarre? And I guess this is kind of a quick, simple style, but it really works for this kind of comic. And I wanted to give these away, or have the art contest, finally judge the art contest winners, and give these away to the winners, or give something away to the winners. I don't know, maybe when I hit 500 subs. Though I'm sure the shipping on this will probably be a pain in the ass. But they're fun books, especially if you're into zombies. But as you can tell, I have quite a few zombie books. Okay, so those are they're black and white. They're $60, and those are new. And when you buy those, you're definitely getting your money's worth if you're into the storyline. This, for example, is not a great book or anything. Zombies. This was $20. You can see it's square bound. I don't know what you call that, stitched in the middle. It's low saturation colors, and there's not a ton of colors. I mean, there's not a ton of ink, and I know inks are the expensive parts in comics. But I'm trying to say, like, for a price comparison, actually, there's not a whole lot of ink in this, but it's very, very effective, the inks the guy's using. And it's a silly little story about, you know, zombies back in about 10 years ago. The zombie stuff was huge. I just wanted to use that as an example of what a $20 book costs in the stores. Oops. Oh, and another weird thing about this book, it doesn't have page numbers on it either. I've never noticed that before. I think it's freaking bizarre. Anyway, another idea I had, which is probably stupid, and if it is, people will let me know in the comments repeatedly. But what if two guys teamed up to print and ship their books at the same time and place? It saves on packaging and shipping, which is also environmentally friendly. It seems like there's less concern for the customers in COMICSGATE. They're kind of treated a bit like cash cows. Only two guys that I know of, and you can set me straight in the comments, that are trying to save the customers money by selling via Amazon are JDA and Mike Miller. And didn't Doug Knaple have a hardcover book at the same price as everyone else? Or I think Clint did Downcast. The first one was $15, and the second one was $20, which is amazing, so credit to him. And don't get me wrong, if your book has more pages, charge more. It's just that it seems like there are a lot of short COMICSGATE comics projects out there. Just my 2 cents, don't get your nose bent out of shape. So regarding the Marvel SJW issue, I don't see that part changing. It's basically Farrakhan and Duke riding over there. A tiger can't change its shorts. So I expect that COMICSGATE will have to find a way to survive in an atmosphere where mainstream comic sales continue to decline. But our digital sales, sure. So now, I don't see that as a problem, or at least not a problem we can address. I think the social media model is viable, especially now that DLive is growing so fast. So in case you're worried about YouTube changing its policy and kicking COMICSGATE off the platform completely, there are alternatives. And that's the thing to remember with YouTube. It can change overnight, and you may find yourself out of business. And while BitChute isn't viable yet, DLive actually is. There are a bunch of spicier channels that have been kicked off YouTube for wrongthink, and their live streams are doing very well, so consider dual broadcasting to DLive. Maybe this version of COMICSGATE, this EVS free version, doesn't need a name. After all, part of the spurging out was over the Pride is a Sin thing, specifically because it came from someone who was part of the crowd and he didn't want to be tarred with the same brush of religious intolerance for saying pride is a sin. Even though we all know it wasn't a big deal, and now that I think about it, was EVS really concerned about bad publicity, or was he just looking for an excuse to fight for more rage-fueled super chats? I don't know. He's an artist, and they are usually mentally ill alcoholics. I was also thinking about a bunch of those other groups that enjoy EVS's content, which is cool. We don't need to fight. We don't need to fight amongst ourselves. We're just, customers. We're going to just enjoy the content and get along, because we're all adults. And keep in mind that as people's interests change over time, people will switch sides. And while I have nothing against anyone in particular, I mean that, let me just say that there's no need to burn bridges with each other, because we might be hanging out in a few months. People's, YouTube, the channels that you watch now are not the channels that you'll be watching in 6 months, because you watch somebody and you kind of realize, you know what, they're not as cool as I thought they were, or they've got feet of clay, or even they're kind of an a-hole, or whatever. Your interests change, so don't burn bridges is what I'm saying. And I will put these thought back here where nobody's probably going to listen to it, because most people listen to like about 5 minutes of video and click away. If I was Miller, I would make peace with Malin, because Malin is not a crazy person like EVS, but because it would also change the dynamic with War Campaign and EVS. It's just something to consider. And maybe this new group of COMICSGATE could use a new name. Either that or take the COMICSGATE name back and own it. Some commonalities I've noticed is that they're majority right of center, probably more Christian than average, more nationalist than globalist, but by no means are they the Bible thumpers. The artists seem to be more religious, but the customers aren't as hardcore. I'm guessing it's hard to name a group yourself. Usually names are given to you, like, hey, that group of assholes. But it might be important to take a name, because there is power in sticking together. I don't have time to talk about I wanted to talk about the JDA Miller split. I'm kind of out of time. About that, I will just say one of them's an artist and one of them is a writer, and they're both, if you look at the overlapping Venn diagram circles of Miller and JDA, those circles are not concentric. They're not completely overlapping. There are people in the periphery of those circles which would be fresh customers to each other if they ran a joint campaign. You know what I'm saying. So let's see, I still don't have an issue with the name of COMICSGATE. Oh, there's some split over whether or not it means, like, the principles behind COMICSGATE. Does it mean social justice warrior free comics or political, all politics free comics? From what I've heard from the SJWs, they're insisting that we're supposed to be free of all politics, but that wasn't how I saw it. If you want to do political spoof comics like Tim Lim's Trump stuff, go ahead. Either it will sell or it won't. And before you jump down my throat, the same argument applies to SJW comics. It'll sell or it won't, but they're clearly not selling. So keep up the good work, Marvel. The SJWs are trying to limit the damage and control the power of COMICSGATE. Though, I mean, they don't really have to worry about us because we're just so far up our own asses now. They don't want right-of-center propaganda any more than we want left-of-center propaganda, and they don't want that propaganda to go viral. Of course, that is never going to happen. The creative arts are very much a left-wing dominated field. The sciences are more of a right-of-center thing. Right-wing comics are never going to be a threat to the industry. I remember them also saying that if we made comics, then we shouldn't review them. Says who? They will do anything to maintain power. Anyway, I realize this was kind of all over the place, but if you want to support the channel, you can click the links to send me art for the channel, BiancaZombie602@gmail.com, or buy me a coffee, the coffee site, whatever. Guys, I will see you all next episode.